We are talking tutorial design for today's video and how the game Stellaris just utterly messes it up when it comes to the new player experience. When it comes to a game's development, tutorial and UI design are often considered to be very underrated, underappreciated areas of building a game, and yet they are vitally important in terms of getting people invested in your game and, more importantly, making sure that they can actually start enjoying it. And some of the best games I've played have a very effective core gameplay loop that gets you in, gets you engaged, and then just keeps getting better from there. Many titles, unfortunately, go for the lengthier introduction, taking hours before the player is supposed to even figure out how to get going. And as you said before, the real game begins at X is horrible design. And part of that has to do with being able to properly explain to someone how your game works. And this is an area where many independent developers and first-time designers tend to mess up the hardest on, with being able to properly explain to someone how it is even play your game to begin with. And as that little stinger at the beginning demonstrates, we're going to be talking about Stellaris. And this is definitely a biggie. Now, if you don't know, Stellaris is the latest game from Paradox Interactive, who have made their whole company and business model around cornering the 4X or grand strategy market. These are games that are immensely complicated, have months and many times years of post-release development support, and if you enjoy any one of their games, you can have at minimum months of gameplay to enjoy, and in many cases you could play these games for years on end and still not find everything around. Unfortunately, they are some of the worst examples of tutorial design and the new player's experience that I have ever seen, to the point that I just cannot get into them. Now, before we get started, and we're kind of doing like a John Madden breakdown of our play of Stellaris, I want to point out that what we're talking about has nothing to do with the gameplay, systems, or core gameplay loop of the game. This is an entirely separate area, and I'm going to leave it to everyone in the comments below to argue about whether Stellaris is good or badly designed. But before we get to that point, I want to spend a few more minutes talking more about tutorial designs in general, because like I said, this is a very important topic that a lot of people tend to either dismiss or just don't understand why. Now, tutorial design is all about educating the player, obviously, about how to play your game. And when it comes to building a tutorial, regardless of the genre or design, there are several questions that you must be able to answer about every mechanic in your game. What am I doing? How do I do it? Why do I do it? And you will know I was thinking about, when do I do it? Now, those four questions sound very simple, but there is a lot that goes on to explain that to a player. Now, one of the reasons, and in an earlier video we talked about this, why there is such a divide in learning curves between action and abstracted games is that action games can kind of cheat in this regard. Because everything is one-to-one from what the player is doing to what's happening on screen, it makes it a lot easier to process how things work. Here's an example. Let's say jumping in a platformer. What do? I jump. How do I do it? I press the A button. Why do I do it? So I don't fall into a pit and die. When do I do it? When there's a pit or obstacle. Yes, I know that was a very complicated thing I just said, but what just took me about 3 seconds to say to you, everybody watching this will probably process in a game within a millisecond. But here's something a little bit harder. How do I properly balance my economy in civilization? Okay, what am I doing? I need to make sure that my economy is in the green. How do I do it? Well, I have to go to each one of these city screens and check the proper resources, how much income they're making, how much they're costing. Why do I do it? So I don't go broke. When do I do it? Well, when do you have to manage your economy in a civilization game? Is it different when you're in military time or in wartime? What about you're trying to balance it for research? or improving your tech, or making city infrastructure improvements, and so on. And this is why, when it comes to learning games or learning design, that 4X and just pretty much any strategy game becomes very hard. Because, like we've said, you're never really being taught these elements in a vacuum, because that's not how these games are being played. In our last video where we talked about grand strategy design and why it's so hard to understand, you don't play a game like Civilization or Europa Universalis and say, I will not make use of any military, or I will never have to use the tech tree or research. That's not how it works. And when you have all these elements working in tandem, it becomes a lot harder to understand how to teach someone. Now, going back to, again, action-based gameplay, you can teach someone in an order of complexity or an order of priority. If the second level is going to require spin jumping, then there better be a tutorial that teaches me that. If I'm not going to need to do a triple spin backward somersault jump until level 15 or post-game content, then we can probably wait on that. But in a grand strategy game, the second you start, you need to be checking your research, you need to be checking your economy, you need to be building units, you need to be checking your faction, you need to be looking at the map, and I could just keep naming things. And it's not really a matter by itself of just the depth of the game. It's just being able to explain things to a player in a way they can understand, how do I connect the dots? And that's where the why and the when am I doing this part of those questions come into play. Because you can teach someone every single button command in your game. How do I raise my power up? Hit the electrical button. How do I command a military unit? You send them from, you click here, you click over there. But being able to connect those dots and start seeing the connection between mechanics and systems becomes very hard to explain to a player. And we're going to switch to that Stellaris footage, I think, next. But one last point before we get over to it. When it comes to teaching players all these elements of mechanics, going back to, again, the divide between action and abstracted-based design, because action games can be built with essentially an organic tutorial, that also cuts down on the learning curve. Because again, it's all about making the player understand, what am I doing? How does it impact the game? If I don't dodge an attack right and I get hit, I know I dodged too early or too late. But when I play a strategy game, how do I know what I'm doing 10 minutes in is going to be the reason why I fail an hour and a half down the line? And you can't really explain that to a player because there's no way of knowing. But I think we've put this off long enough. So after a quick shout out to our Patreon backers, we're going to start breaking down some of the Stellaris tutorial and how I spend an hour just failing at learning about the game. But see you all in a second. And now for a quick thank you to our Patreon backers. And if you'd like to continue this discussion on game design, you'll find our Discord channel linked down below. Alright, so this is the footage I have from Stellaris, and yes, you're going to be seeing like the YouTube notes and all that because I'm going to be pausing and fast forwarding while I'm talking about this. Because, again, when it comes to tutorial design, it's not really per se about playing the game. It's about showing a player what it means to actually understand what's going on. So we're going to be, again, doing kind of like John Madden here with my little mouse cursor here. But here's the first problem with Stellaris. Right from minute 1 of loading the game up, there is a very big new player experience problem. Does anyone know what that is? You can pause the video here if you want to take a second to guess, but the answer is very obvious. There is nothing down here that relates to a tutorial, or what should I be trying to do to learn this game. Now, some of you will probably be commenting below saying, well, shouldn't there be a manual to read? No. Never assume that a new player is going to read the manual. And especially in today's market, you need to be able to explain to the player in-game how to play your game. Now, here's problem number 2. There is nothing on this screen that is supposed to educate a new player about what's going on. What are these choices right here? Which one's an easy choice? What's a hard choice? I don't know. What about this random button? Create new? Again, as a new player, what am I looking at here? We have these various icons, which there's not even any indication for a new player that these are all featuring pop-up tooltips when you mouse over them. Again, there is just no indication here as to how a new player is supposed to learn this game. And this is a very big problem that's indicative of all of Paradox Interactive's games. They assume that anyone who is playing the game right now already has hundreds of hours playing their previous games. And you cannot do that if you expect your market to grow. Every game is somebody's first. Maybe somebody got Stellaris as a gift. Maybe they were recommended by a friend who really likes Stellaris and says, well, if you like strategy games, this is one of the best. But how is someone brand new supposed to learn what's going on with what they're seeing right here? Now I'm going to fast forward a little bit more till we get to the actual game. And you're going to see right here, in fact I'm going to go back about 5 seconds. So this is the screen that somebody sees right now after the game begins. So there are several big things going on. This UI doesn't really help a new player understand what's happening. We have a lot of commands on the left, a lot of resources at the top. What am I prioritizing here as a new player? Again, I have no idea. Now, we have this advisor here who I'm about to click on full tutorial. So this is supposed to be if you're new playing a game. I'm so excited. And the tutorial itself is basically separate of the game. So I just click that, and I'm going to pause again, and the tutorial's gone. There's nothing here that tells me, well, what am I supposed to click on? Where is this situation log that the game is telling me? Is it these UI elements up here? I'm not sure if you can see with how the window is being displayed. Is the situation log right here? I don't know. And that is a very big problem. While you cannot make a fully scripted tutorial, especially for a grand strategy game, you still need to give the player some level of guidance. And probably, I should rephrase that, an extra layer of guidance compared to someone who's already played the game. So this situation log is horrible. I'm going to pause it again. Like I said, this is our John Madden video right here. That situation log is a terrible form of tutorial design. And it's very simple why. The situation log exists outside of the main game screen. It is one layer deep. When we say that, what we mean is that how many screens it takes to find out information. So every time I click on one of these commands over here, we're going one layer deep. If I click on a button or a menu within that menu to get to somewhere else, we're going 2 layers deep. When it comes to tutorial design, you don't want any layers. What I'm looking at here, I should be getting tutorial messages somewhere on screen to help me out. And I'm not getting that right now. More importantly, by having to go one layer deep into the situation log, it means it's taking away my focus from the main game. And this is a common issue of turn-based strategy tutorials, that I have to be constantly shifting my focus at a point where I don't understand what's going on. So how am I supposed to learn? Now you see those indications up there for the research. Those should be off right now. If I'm trying to learn this game for the first time, there should be nothing on screen that should be distracting me from that focus. And here is another big problem. We're going to pause again. Stellaris features a tutorial system where these messages only pop up when I click on something on screen. But what I'm clicking on has no relevance to actually learning the game. And this is a very big problem because, again, as the player, I don't know what my focus is supposed to be. Am I supposed to be looking at these resources up here? Am I supposed to be moving units around? What the hell is this thing down here? I don't know. And because I don't know, I'm not getting a lesson into how this game is supposed to work. And like I said, when it comes to these kinds of tutorials, you really need to look at things from a new player perspective. This is why YouTubers who make guide videos are worth their weight in gold, because they will be able to explain to the player their thought process and what they should be focusing on. If I have to click around your screen and have no idea what's going on, then your tutorial has failed. And sometimes that may mean locking UI elements. There is no reason at all that a new player should be able to click on any of these features all around the screen right now, because I don't know what they are. They're not important to learning the game right now, and if I click on them by accident or just by, messing around, it's going to make things even more confusing. Now, if we fast forward a little bit further here, the game begins to explain about doing surveying around the various planets. We have the outliner here showing me. But there is a lot of time I'm spending, and again, bringing up messages that have no right to be shown to me right now. But as I fast forward, you can see the preview window, I think, in the bottom of the screen. I am spending a lot of time sitting around. And that's not good, because I'm waiting for more tutorial messages to come up to tell me, well, what should I be doing? And this is an issue for this kind of game, because as we've said, grand strategy design never happens in a vacuum. I'm not just going to spend 30 minutes doing nothing but surveying, followed by 30 minutes of nothing but tech research, followed by 30 minutes of combat. And here's a perfect example right here. We're getting events that are popping up due to the normal scope of playing the game. But the game makes no attempt to explain to the player what this all means. And this is a game where the events can set up massive quest lines and event scenarios that can play out over the course of entirely playing the game. And this is why I think if you're going to do an effective tutorial in a 4X game, then you either need to make it very, very scripted, as in to the point that, again, it would literally lock these elements until I've kind of proven myself, or it needs to be freeform or almost a dynamic tutorial that kind of goes with what you're seeing on the screen. So, for instance, let's say I'm playing a game like Civilization, and there are no mining resources on my relative area. The game would not pop up with any tutorial messages for that. But the second that we find one on the map, I should get something saying, hey, you discovered blank. You should start doing so and so if you want to research it or make use of it. And if you do that, you'll be able to do X. And again, being able to explain all this stuff is very difficult for a lot of developers, because for developers who play their games and do a lot of playtesting along those lines, you become conditioned to all this. All these elements that you see on screen right now, for the dev team and for their hardcore fan base, this stuff is probably elementary at this point for them. It makes perfect sense to me, so it must make perfect sense for everybody else. That is never the case. And as a new player, they are not going to understand all the complexities or all the little things you've done. Like this right here, when I clicked on this colony screen for the first time, there was no explanation as to what's going on there. And that is not good. Every system of your game needs to be explained to the player, especially in a grand strategy game like this. And again, the situation log is just horrid for a new player. And I know right now that there are people watching this who are probably going to say, well, you learn the game by playing it. But there is a very big caveat. If the player has no idea as to how these things are connecting, they're just pushing buttons. And you don't learn a grand strategy game just by pushing buttons. Did this cultist attack happen because I clicked on something? Is it just a random event? I don't know. And again, the player needs a foundation. They need a staging ground or a jumping off point in order to start understanding the game. Because if they don't have that, then none of the complexity, none of the UI, this lovely thing right here, will do anything to help them. And most likely, they're going to stop playing your game. And that is a potential loss of a customer, and more importantly, that could easily be the loss of that person then talking to their friends about your game. And like I said, this kind of stuff, it's where a lot of first-time developers will fail on. But to begin to wrap things up for this video, and again, this is a topic that we're not done talking about here. In order to understand how it is somebody plays your game, you need to do a lot of playtesting. We've spoken about this on several devcasts before, but you want people who are experts in your genre, just as you want people who have never touched it. And you need to pay attention to both, especially if your hardcore fans are being confused by something. That right there is a glaring red flag that you need to do a better job of explaining this. Because if somebody with hundreds of hours of gameplay under their foot or under their boot don't understand how something works, then there is no way in hell that a new player will. And for those of you watching this right now, when you played Stellaris and you understood it, did you have a background with grand strategy games or with Paradox's previous titles beforehand? And can you think of games that you've played that the tutorial or the UI were just so bad from a new player's experience that you lost any hope or interest in trying to learn that game? Let me know in the comments, but thank you so much for watching this video. Like I said earlier, be sure to check out our Discord channel and all that great stuff linked down below. And you have a topic for me to cover in the future, don't hesitate to get in touch. But otherwise, come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Until next time, have a great night. If you're looking for a book on design, my first title, 20 Essential Games to Study, is out now. It is available where most books are sold, and it comes in paper, hardcover, or digital copies. This is the perfect book for anyone interested in learning about game design, whether you are a student, enthusiast, or just a fan. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel linked down below where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.